Otherwise, the microphone is hot. Thank you.
So are we ready to go? Okay, so good morning, everybody. I'm Bruce Weir, Chair of the DNA Subcommittee of the New York Commission on Forensic Science. Today is May 13th, 2022, and today's meeting will be conducted via video conferencing. So we'll conduct our business with a roll call to be sure we capture all the votes. This time I'm going to ask each member to state their names and reply present as I take attendance. So Dr. Bieber.
Frederick Bieber, present. Good morning.
Thank you. Dr. Eastman is not present, I believe. Dr. Kidd.
And Kidd, present.
Thank you. Dr. Smith.
Jennifer Smith, present. Good morning.
Thank you. Dr. Souza, I believe is not present. And Dr. Gittings.
Catherine Gittings, present. Good morning.
Thank you. It looks like we've established a quorum. So you've all received the draft agenda for today's meeting. Is there any discussion regarding the agenda? All right, hearing none. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda for this meeting?
I move to approve the agenda.
That was Jennifer Smith. Thank you. And a second.
And Kidd, second.
Thank you. When I call upon you, please state your vote. My vote is aye. Dr. Bieber.
Fred Bieber, aye.
Thank you. Dr. Kidd.
Ken Kidd, aye.
Thank you. Dr. Smith.
Jennifer Smith, aye.
Thank you. And Dr. Gittings.
Catherine Gittings, aye.
Thank you. I see we've the motion carries. I see we've rearranged the alphabet, so I don't think that's going to cause confusion. So you've all received draft minutes of the February 4th, 2022 meeting. Any discussion regarding the minutes from our last virtual meeting? Rushing items. So do I have a motion to accept the minutes of the February 4th, 2022 meeting? And I have a motion from.
So moved. Catherine Gittings.
Thanks, thank you. And a second for that, please.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. So again, I'll call upon you for your vote, this time to approve the minutes for the last meeting. My vote is aye. Dr. Bieber.
Fred Bieber, aye.
Thank you. Dr. Kidd.
Abstain, Ken Kidd. I was not at the meeting.
Thank you. And Dr. Smith.
Jennifer Smith, aye.
Thank you. And Dr. Gittings.
Catherine Gittings, aye.
Do we have sufficient votes? We have four.
We do.
Four. Okay, thank you. So the motion carries. Thank you. All right, so we'll move into our regular items on accreditation and lab updates. Erie County. Does anybody need to join us right at the moment? From Erie County. Okay. So in our documentation, we've got a reaccreditation assessment report from April 6, 2022, external QAS received April 20th, and letters concerning the renewal of accreditation with documentation, submission of the QAS to the FBI, and acknowledgement from the FBI. So the lab had a full reassessment and external QAS audit conducted in April of this year. There were no findings. An updated QAS has been provided as a late document to us, and this standard 9.4.1 was marked yes, but it should have been not applicable. The lab has provided the QAS to ENDIS. ANAB has issued a full renewal of accreditation for the laboratory through August 31, 2026. At this point, any discussion on this before we move to adopt that?
This is Jennifer Smith, and first of all, I want to congratulate them on that success, but I did have a quick question about the comment that was made. I just wondered what the auditors meant when they said the lab would benefit from updating their validation studies. So if there was somebody from Erie that could just speak to us about that. It's just out of curiosity more than anything.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Michelle, you've been elevated. You're all set. Do you want to turn your
Great.
camera on if you have a camera? If not, we can hear you.
So, bear with me. I am
Oh, well.
starting this video. Hope it's okay. I didn't get a preview, so good morning, everyone.
Welcome
far,
to the
success.
meeting.
Thank you.
It's nice to see you almost in person. So
Yeah.
did you hear Jennifer Smith's question?
I did, and it's a great question. So the audit team that came through, the assessment team, was very thorough. They didn't just look at the validations that were completed during this last cycle. They looked at validations from all time. And they thought the reason they added that conforming with comment was because there are some validations that were completed in years past. For example, the one that we had a discussion about was a validation of our microspectrophotometer, which is used for paint analysis and trace. It was validated back in 2005 under the standards at that time. And since then, some of the accreditation standards have changed and are more detailed. So they thought the lab would benefit from maybe revisiting some of these validations to include some of the summary statements. For example, this a newer standard or something in our manual says that the validation would specify when additional validation work would need to be done. And that wasn't done back in 2006. So they didn't have any concerns about the validations, but they thought we would benefit from maybe updating some of the summary statements or some of the documentation that was done at that time.
Thank you.
Great,
Jennifer.
thank you. Yeah, no, that was, as I said, I was just curious about it. But again, congratulations.
Yeah, lovely.
Thank you, appreciate it.
And so the video link works nicely, so that was great. Thank you. All right, so do I have a motion to issue a binding recommendation to the Commission on Forensic Science to renew the New York State accreditation to the Erie County Central Police Services Forensic Laboratory in the discipline of biology for the period concurrent with its A&AB accreditation to expire August 31, 2026. A motion.
I move.
Okay. Smith, second.
Ken Kidd, second.
Thank you, Ken. And we'll proceed to a vote. My vote is aye. Dr. Beaver.
Fred Bieber, aye.
Thank you. Dr. Kidd.
Ken Kidd, aye.
Thank you. Dr. Smith.
Jennifer Smith, aye.
Thank you. And Dr. Gettings.
Catherine Gettings, aye.
Thank you. So the motion carries. Thank you. That was nice work.
Thank you.
So Monroe County Reaccreditation Assessment Report from April 28th of this year. So in April, the lab underwent a full reaccreditation assessment activity, and the reports included in our materials. The lab received 6 non-conformances, however, none were specific to DNA testing. The laboratory is in the process of remediating the non-conformances, and the subcommittee will review all final documentation at a later meeting. So any comment or questions concerning this Monroe County proceedings? Okay, thank you. So things are in progress, and we'll hear at our next meeting. So thank you for the people if you are available. All right, so we can move on. New York State Police Crime Lab. We have various documents, a letter regarding the renewal of A&AB accreditation, email chain concerning some non-conformance discussion, including corrective actions, timelines, acceptance of plan, additional information, email chain concerning the biology non-conformance, and resolution of the non-conformance, and an acknowledgement from the FBI for database QAs. Excuse me, just a minute. So there we go. Thank you. So, so the lab, the New York State Police had a full reassessment and external QAS audits of both casework and databank sections conducted in January of this year. There were 2 non-conformances, 1 DNA and 1 latent prints. The subcommittee received the initial assessment report at its February meeting. The lab has successfully remediated both non-conformances, and the objective evidence related to the DNA issue has been provided for the subcommittee's review. Additionally, the laboratory has provided both QAS documents to ANDIS. ANAB has issued full renewal of accreditation for the lab through May 31, 2026. Do I have any discussion or questions concerning this activity? I do have. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't have a question. I just want to, again, say congratulations, but also thank you. It was really thorough. I thought how through the documents, we could walk through the thought process of how they were going through their corrective actions. So I just wanted to say kudos to all the paperwork that was provided and the quality steps that I think that were taken.
I agree.
And also, you know, one of these unintended consequences of actually trying to, you know, make things simpler. So it was kind of fascinating to walk through that as the lab went through it.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. But I do have a question for Dr. Wickenheiser. Could he join us, please? Or someone else from the lab there.
Hi, this is Julie Pizzicatti, Director of the Biological Science Section. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Julie. Do you have a camera?
No, I do not. Sorry.
Okay, that's fine. So is Ray not able to join?
I believe he's attending. I'm not sure if he's.
Okay, that's fine. So I just have a question. So this is, as Dr. Smith said, this is a very nice exercise for us to go through this documentation, the chain of events. I think this is the first time I've certainly had the chance to see some of your protocols and guidelines. And I just had a question, sort of a general question. You gave us a document, and there's a section D7.9 DNA report conclusions, where you lay out the various details of statistical conclusions and the appropriate language to include in reports. So that was all very interesting. I was wondering, without going into a huge amount of discussion, I noticed you've got 3 different ways of presenting results. What's called a conditional match probability, a likelihood ratio, and a combined probability of inclusion. Is it possible for you to inform us why you do that? Why, I mean, so, and how does an analyst decide which of those 3 to use?
Well, we have those options available depending on what type of profile we detect. So if we have a full single source profile, partial single source profile, or a deduced major contributor from a mixture, the analyst would be using the conditional match probability.
I see.
If there's a mixture profile that's clearly determined by the analyst to be a 2-person mixture, they are instructed to use a likelihood ratio. And if we have a mixture where there's either a mixture of more than 2 people, where they can make an inclusion, the analyst would then use the combined probability of inclusion. These are our current protocols. We are currently validating star mix, so everything will change after our star mix validation, but these are the types of options analysts have to provide statistical weight to their conclusions depending on the type of profile that's detected from the evidence.
And that, I'm sure they get quite extensive training of not to know which one of the ones to use and when.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, during their training to become DNA analysts, and then we have monthly casework staff meetings, and whenever we have an improvement to the protocol or a significant change to the protocol, such as, you know, the finding that we had with ANAB, we actually conducted, one of our supervisors, Jay Caponera, created a PowerPoint presentation and provided a training to our staff, because we do have a significant number of DNA analysts, so we want to ensure that everyone understands any change. And this is, again, after they receive extensive training to become DNA analysts. If we make any change to the protocol, we always hold a training session for the analysts.
Sure. So it's clear then that they have guidance about which Number to report. So where do the numbers come from? Is it in-house software, or is this PopStats, or is it
We're
some other?
using PopStats.
Okay. So PopStats has an option to include a theta correction every time. I don't see that mentioned here. Is it routinely done or routinely not done?
I would have to defer to, I don't know if Russ Gettig is available, but I honestly do not know that.
Okay.
If you want to hold on 1 second, I have a supervisor who's got a tremendous amount of expertise in statistics right next door to me. I can
No,
go see if
I
you.
don't
Okay.
think that.
I believe we incorporate a theta correction. I just don't want to misspeak because yeah.
Fine.
Okay.
Oh yes, so this is so you'll be doing some updates to this document with StarMix coming online. So that's interesting.
Yes,
Now,
that's part of our validation is now, we have to make decisions on the implementation, and then we'll have corresponding protocol revisions. And we already had vendor supplied training for StarMix, and we already intend to have extensive in-house training because it is a paradigm shift in terms of how we do our casework.
Oh, it's huge. Yes, I agree. So, will this committee, will we or do we routinely get an opportunity to see the documentation before it's finally adopted by the lab?
Is that
Well,
a question? No, for me.
So we will provide what is given by the laboratory. Typically, that does include a copy of their validation. It depends on how it's written up, and I can't speak for certain as to all of them if it includes the modified the procedures and protocols, but
So it's actually
they'll be present to speak to it when they present the validation.
So thank you. So it's quite a deep question. Our task is to advise the Commission on appropriate procedures, and of course the statistical calculations and reporting are extremely important. And I'm a little concerned, I would be concerned if we didn't get an opportunity to see those documents before they were finally adopted.
May I ask a question that's more for Jill?
Sure.
Jill, I know that the DNA subcommittee reviewed the use of StarMix when Erie County first put it online. Is it a requirement that every lab that then adopts that software program present their validation to the subcommittee?
So that's a great question, Julie. I think
I wasn't aware, honestly, that was happening, because I know a number of other labs have adopted the use of StarMix, and I don't recall having each individual lab after Erie County present their validation.
So I think given the shift and how things have been going, particularly related to StarMix, and it's a conversation I think we need to have offline with the lab directors and quality assurance directors. But I would
I'm
like
not
to
objecting
see.
to it. I just want to make sure that we do things properly. If
Right.
there is an approval required by the subcommittee, that we ensure we have a presentation and obtain that approval before we actually implement it.
Right, understandable. And so for, I think the kind of differences that we've seen in some of the validation studies, it would be helpful. And we have been reevaluating that process over the past few months. So it is a conversation that we're going to have. Again, StarMix, hot topic issue. Validation.
We're definitely keeping track of the discussions that are going on with the subcommittee and elsewhere. I mean, we're still in the process of doing the validation. Our tentative implementation date is sometime this fall. So if you wouldn't, I know that you'll certainly communicate out to the labs whether, our lab in particular, whether a presentation is required before we actually implement StarMix.
Right. And so the other thing that I want to say is that one of the asks has been that validation studies be provided in order to have a a comprehensive review of the NIST paper with relation to validations done in New York State. Depending on the timeline of that, we would be requesting that of you anyway, because all of the other labs who are currently online and they have provided their validations to OFS. And like I said, and once final decisions are made and comments have been reviewed, and then that will start the process for the subcommittee to review the validations of the StarMix laboratories.
Yes, that's absolutely understood. Thank you.
Yep.
So thank you. So my questions were not motivated by StarMix. My questions are much more fundamental on the motivation for having different methods of calculating and reporting match statistics. And I take the point that with StarMix coming online, there is an opportunity to revisit all this documentation, and I believe the subcommittee has an obligation to review that documentation. And I think at that time, for each laboratory, we would like a discussion of their statistical calculations and the motivation for using them and how they're reported. So there's no immediate action. I think looks like this is going to be coming up naturally. Any other discussion from the committee about New York State? So so we now need to proceed. So we've had a little preamble about the non-conformances and their resolution. So now do I have a motion to issue a binding recommendation to the Commission on Forensic Science to renew the New York State accreditation for the New York State Police Crime Lab and the discipline of biology for the period concurrent with the ANAB accreditation to expire May 31, 2026. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved, Fred Bieber.
Thank you, Fred. And a second.
Second, Catherine Gettings.
Thank you. My vote is aye. Dr. Bieber.
Fred Bieber, aye.
Thank you. Dr. Kidd.
Kidd, aye.
Thank you. Dr. Smith.
Jennifer Smith, aye.
Thank you. And Dr. Giddings.
Catherine Gettings, aye.
Thank you. So moving on, just for informational purposes, this is under, excuse me, but I'm confused. I forget.
It's still under the New York
Still
State
under New York
Police.
State.
Just the management structure update change. Major
The major.
has replaced Major Colwell because he's retired.
Thank you. And have we sent a message to Major Colwell, congratulating him on his retirement and thanking him? Have we done that already? But if we're not, I think we should. The committee to recognize.
We can send along an email.
That would be nice. Thank you. That'd be great. All right. So, excuse my confusion there. So the Onondaga County Center for Forensic Science, we have an email concerning their internal QAS and a letter concerning an issue of non-conformance. So in February, the lab conducted an internal QAS. The file was provided to the subcommittee as a separate file due to file formatting. So we have the information. Additionally, the lab has provided a notification regarding a non-conformity to QAS standards 15.1 and 15.2. Those standards require an audit every calendar year, and the laboratory did not conduct an activity in 2021. We have that good documentation. So I believe that's just for information purposes, Jill. No need for us to do anything. Is there any discussion from the committee on that? Okay, so thank you. So thank you for the lab people standing by. Looks like we won't bother you. So moving on then to old business, and Dr. Dooley will give us a partial match update.
Yes, good morning. So for partial match, there's been no change since our last meeting. We're still at 93 names requested, 49 names released, and all 49 investigations have been closed.
Thank you. Any questions for Dr. Dooley? Very well, let's proceed to the familial search update, and this may be a little more interesting. Dr. Dooley.
I'll start with giving the background of the update of the numbers as I do every meeting. For the familial search program, we've had 53 applications in total with 8 resubmissions and 2 renewals. So a total of 43 unique applications. Of those, 37 have been approved, 13 rejected, 2 have been withdrawn, and 1 is in process. The 37 approved applications, there are 7 in queue or in process, and 30 have been completed. Any questions regarding the numbers before we get to the other matter?
So that's a program that has been implemented and working. And do we have any information about the consequences of these familial searches? Have they been helpful?
Yes. So there have been 2 suspects that have been charged in 2 different cases of the 30 that have been completed. And the program has successfully been working, clearly, but we do have a bit of an update in terms of the program at this time. There has been a decision on the lawsuit that was previously pending by the appellate division in the First Judicial Department, basically reversing the ruling that the Supreme Court had made vacating the regulations associated with familial search. What that means that as of this point, there is a pause in the familial search program. We are reviewing the decision here at the Division of Criminal Justice Services and its implications. We're currently discussing appeal strategies with the Office of the Attorney General. I believe the decision has been provided to all of the members, and it is public. Anyone can Google that and find that. So basically, with the vacating of the familial search regulations, it means they're no longer in effect. And a decision to appeal the New York's highest court can be made. And as I said, we're reviewing and discussing appeal strategies.
So thank you. So I noticed that this committee was named as a respondent in that court case. And maybe you could explain what our role actually is or was in that case.
So I have to put a disclaimer in that this case was filed before my time and perhaps before the time of about half of the DNA subcommittee. So when it first hit, I'm not exactly sure what it was. Clearly, the naming of parties in the suit is just that, you had a hand in the process of adopting and accepting familial search. Really, it's up to the Attorney General to kind of argue that case. So it's not as if, as the DNA subcommittee, you directly argued the case. I think, I'm not sure if Colleen wants to weigh in and say anything more. Colleen Glavin's our head counsel here at DCJS.
Thank you.
Sure.
That would be very helpful. Thank you, Colleen.
Good morning, everyone. So the original case and named the Division of Criminal Justice Services, the Commission on Forensic Science, and the DNA Subcommittee, all 3 as defendants in the matter. The Attorney General represents all 3 named parties in the case. So it went to the Supreme Court, and then the plaintiffs in the case appealed that decision, and then it went to the appellate division. The next level would be to the Court of Appeals in New York, which is New York's highest court. The decision was a split decision. It was 3-2. So when you have 2 dissenting opinions, if the case were to be appealed, it can go up automatically given those dissents. So if there's a determination to make the appeal, it would go to the Court of Appeals for further consideration on the issues. The issues in the cited in the decision did not have to do with the familial search process, but more the procedures and the regulatory authority of DCJS to make those regulations at all, and whether or not maybe it should be part of legislative, there should be a statutory action instead of regulation.
Thank you. So that's helpful. So my concern is the respondent's document supplied to the court in our name, and it certainly was before most of our time, but it would be a concern, I would think, if the committee had not a chance to see that document before it was submitted, in light of some of the language in the report. And is there any assurance we can receive that if an appeal is mounted, that and this document is supplied in our name, that we get a chance to see that and advise the commission of any concerns?
Because the subcommittee is named party, we can discuss that. As we will let the Attorney General's office know that as parties you would like to be made aware of the papers.
Well, I think it goes a little stronger than that. I think we have an obligation to help, and I think for myself and maybe for my colleagues, this was a very concerning issue. This is a very useful procedure. We've heard about its successes, so it would be a pity. It's not the case here, but it would be a pity if an appeal founded because of language that wasn't as clear as it may have been in documentation provided in our name. Do I have any other comments from our committee members? I'm sure you have some.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Fred Bieber here. I'm, I guess, relieved that the court recognized that the use of familial DNA matching, as they quote it, has produced laudable crime-solving outcomes in many cases. In fact, in one of the two cases that Jill made reference to, the arrest was made based on the murder of a young girl in New York City whose lifeless body was found in a dumpster. And in the written ruling of the majority, it's evident to me at least that the majority opinion displays some serious misunderstandings of forensic familial searching. First of all, by suggesting that family pedigrees can be created, and also by conflating forensic genetic genealogy with familial searching by their reference to the Golden State Killer case, which was not resolved by familial searching, but rather what has now been referred to as investigative genetic genealogy. And I would strongly urge us to consider a proposal where we not only invite, but strongly request that the Attorney General do file an appeal. I think an alternative that has been raised is legislative change, and I'd be confident that in an open public forum, the public would support giving the dedicated forensic labs in New York all the tools they need to help identify and bring to justice the perpetrators of violent crimes against victims of any color or creed. And like the price of gas, violent crime is rising around us, but not everyone experiences this in the same way. Well, for many of us fortunate ones, crime seems a distant issue experienced by others in another place, but for many, crime and fear of crime is a daily life-threatening concern. And if one takes just a moment to review published crime statistics over the past decade, you'd note that people of color bear an increasingly large share of harm from crime. So speaking personally, it's hard for me to understand how we can look ourselves in the mirror each morning knowing that we're not doing more to help protect women and girls from violent recidivistic offenders. That would be my strong feeling. This is a good tool. It has been used wisely and carefully in the dozen states in our country that use it, including New York. And I think that the DNA subcommittee, when it gave advice to the commission, did so with care and concern about the scientific integrity of the process. And ultimately, as we all know, these at some point become not scientific questions anymore, but policy questions. And I don't see anything in the legislation that created the DNA Act in New York that precludes familial searching. If the goal of DNA testing is to help identify persons of interest, then this is just one more tool to help do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Any other discussions? And then we can see your suggestion.
Ken Kidd, following on Fred's comment about the science, I was quite impressed by how misinterpreted the science was, as though this was something completely different. Thinking about DNA matches, this is part of that science. It is not something completely different. And I think that point needs to be made. It certainly did not come through. In fact, the opposite came through in that decision.
Thank you. Dr. Giddings, did you have any comments?
I have more of just a practical question, maybe for Jill or Shelley. If for those of us who weren't a part of these earlier discussions, if we could find the meeting references, the videos that the subcommittee had when they talked about this, years back, that would be really helpful if we could get what meetings it was discussed in, kind of the time points, if we want to go back and review those, what the committee discussed at the time.
Absolutely. We can send that out to you in an email.
Great, thank you.
And Dr. Smith, any thoughts from you?
Well, I really can't say it any better than Dr. Bieber said, but I would like to explore, because I know we are allowed to do some things and we aren't, but I agree with everyone that perhaps we should be prepared to provide additional information in case the appeal goes forward, at least on the technical issues that we found, just for clarification's sake, that we should be prepared to do that. And I think to Dr. Giddings' point, a review of that, all of us that weren't present, a review of that sort of bolsters our ability as the current committee to continue to support the actions of the previous committee. Because my concern is I don't want to be a person that gets on a committee and then kind of unintentionally reinvents a wheel or re-examines a process, because, that sometimes we get kind of ourselves twisted in knots over some of these issues when one group has already thoroughly reviewed something. So I don't think we want to create that precedent either. We just want to keep things moving forward. And then just a question. This now pauses familial searching, I assume, in New York. So those cases that were in progress literally will be stopped in their tracks. Is that I think people should understand the full consequence of this decision, because sometimes people make these decisions and then they don't live the consequences of them. So that, just a little clarity on that, Jill, if you have it, is that what this means? Everything just stops in place?
So I can definitely speak to the 7 that are in process or in queue, and those are paused at this time. I think that unless there is an issue with sample integrity or processes that have already started, where there can be a discussion where it would have adverse consequences to that. But at this time, those are definitely paused. And in terms of receiving applications, that is paused as well. We are putting them, if we do receive them, we will notify them of the decision and we will hold them, but they will not be reviewed or processed or continue on for approval or any of the technical examination from the state police. With reference to those cases that have already been completed and training results have been given, or if a name has been released, at this time, I believe we cannot unring the bell. So their investigations have already begun. And then and Colleen, please feel free to weigh in, but I do feel as if it would be a decision for the court if a suspect were to be arrested and it were to be put to trial to determine where this decision falls within that.
And I think it's fair. The regulations that have been vacated by the court's decision deal with our process, and not once we release. So what, that while we still monitor what goes on, the individual departments are not necessarily governed by our regulations for the process that are no longer in effect. So, it's our understanding that they can continue their work on cases.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Dr. Bieber, did you want to formulate a motion?
Yes, Dr. Weir, I'd like to propose a motion for a vote that the DNA subcommittee asks the Forensic Commission to formally write the Attorney General of New York to urge her in strongest possible terms to file an appeal forthwith to this unfortunate decision.
Fred, would you entertain a friendly amendment and express the committee's willingness to participate in the preparation of documentation?
Of course, yes.
Do I have a second for this omnibus motion?
I second that.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this?
Yeah, I believe Julie Pizzicatti has her hand raised again.
Excuse me?
Julie?
Julie Pizzicatti appears to have her hand raised. Is there something she would we like to hear from her, or are we good with the motion as it stands? Which, by the way, I would like to repeat the motion.
I apologize for interrupting. I didn't know if there was the one question about the current status. I didn't know if there was a question about the ones that we had already started in the DNA data bank. So I was just going to provide an update on that.
That would be interesting to hear.
We had, when the court decision was released, we had 2 searches in progress, meaning we were doing the STR and/or YSTR analysis on the samples. So we're going to complete the DNA analysis component to avoid any loss of sample. And then we're going to pause those 2 searches. And we are not going to initiate any other searches unless otherwise directed.
Yeah, thank you.
So I apologize for interrupting your motion. I just wanted to give that update.
No, thank you, Julie.
Thank you. Dr. Dooley, can you remind us what Fred's motion is?
I will do my best, and Fred, please feel free to correct me as it is. That the subcommittee asks the Commission on Forensic Science to formulate and write to formulate a writing to the Attorney General to urge her to file an appeal forthwith and communicate the willingness to assist in providing documentation with that.
Thank you. That's excellent. Further discussion? Very well. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Beaver. So I'll put the motion to a vote. My vote is aye.
Fred Bieber, aye.
Thank you. Dr. Kidd.
Ken Kidd, aye.
Dr. Smith.
Jennifer Smith, aye.
And Dr. Gettings.
Catherine Gettings, aye.
The motion carries. So thank you. I think that was a very helpful discussion on a very important matter that is certainly within our purview. I think we all share the concerns. So thank you. CODIS, I've gathered from Tom Leach, has notified that there are no relevant CODIS bulletins at this time. Mixture interpretation. So Byteswork has provided a memo concerning questions that we posed at our February meeting. Any discussion regarding this memo? And Craig Connor is apparently available. Good. Maybe we could bring Craig in just to summarize the answers for us.
Hi, Craig, you're unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, hi
Yes.
Craig. Do you have a camera?
I do. I'm trying to turn it on.
Okay, thank you.
How is that? Good morning, everyone.
That's wonderful. Good to see you. Thanks for joining
You
us.
too.
So just could
Um,
you just briefly update us? I mean, thanks for your response in writing, but just helpful to hear.
Yes. So basically, based on the three questions that were asked about the proficiency test vendors, and then how do we address mixture interpretation, and specifically prop gen training competency and proficiency tests, we formulated this letter. As you can see from the response, all of the labs are using one or all of the three different proficiency test vendors that are available: CTS, IQAS from Bodie, and then Forensic Assurance. I believe CTS, as we put here, is the only one that officially has a PG component, but the laboratories that have been online with PropGen have ensured that if there is a stat that is required by the vendor, that obviously that gets included, but then also even if a stat isn't required by the vendor, the laboratories are writing up the proficiency tests as they would a normal case, which includes running the probabilistic genotyping to perform a statistic. So all of the 5 laboratories in the state that are online with StarMix have been doing so. And I believe the labs that are not online yet will follow suit when they do get online. But more to the point of the mixture interpretation and PropGen training, I think in general, all the laboratories are following training program that includes demonstrations, pertinent articles, practice tests, as well as competency tests for each of the procedures. And then for mixture interpretation and PropGen, each laboratory is taking it quite a step further with looking at manual interpretations and then being able to compare that to the PropGen. As we know, the PropGen is a tool that's used for helping the interpretation. So the analyst needs to know whether or not the diagnostics are right from the PropGen. So by doing the mixture or the manual interpretation exercises, the labs are ensuring that the analysts will be able to properly look at and interrogate the results from the PropGen system to ensure that they're meeting their qualitative expectations, along with the relevant lectures and topics regarding PG, because we want to ensure that the analysts have the information, the background information, to be able to use the programs, but also to, again, interrogate the results to ensure that they are what they're expecting to do. They're practical data sets with hands-on exercises, required readings, and then a specific competency test for the PropGen systems. Most of the laboratories have been able to provide new StarMix users with training from the manufacturer. So ESR does offer in-person trainings. A large laboratory like OCME, we haven't been able to send 100 people, but we have sent a good number of people to those trainings, and then we'll mimic our new analyst trainings based on what we had learned from getting ESR. So the laboratories that have been able to send their analysts to the training have done that, and then others have incorporated that into their training. And then along with the competency tests, labs are doing an oral portion, whether it's an oral examination or a mock court or both.
Great, that's excellent. Thank you very much. Any questions for Craig?
Yeah, this is Dr. Smith. First of all, thank you very much for pulling this information together. I thought it was very thorough, and I appreciate the labs for responding to it. Just a general question or a comment. When I look at the training that the labs are going through, it seems to reflect the training process that labs have been going through with all the right steps and all the right processes. The question I would have, these processes, the training programs, validation studies, those are also reviewed when the labs go through their audits. Isn't that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So they're quality. So there is oversight then of the lab's process, if I'm remembering things correctly.
That is correct. So as you said, during the audits and assessments, those things are reviewed. And then obviously when it's a new technique that has been validated, that does get reviewed by the auditor to ensure that the proper validation steps, standards for QAS, and then some of them will also ensure that the SWGDAM recommendations are followed for the validation process of new methodologies that do come up.
And then it looks like you have contacted the proficiency test providers, and there actually are, I believe you said one, but it looks like there might be two that have a PG component.
Yes.
And by that, help me understand kind of what you mean. Can you just clarify what that means?
So these are still pretty new. Of the labs in the state, I don't think anybody I know, because we just had our meeting, nobody has actually gotten that specific test as of yet. I think the companies themselves have just rolled it out, and they're still trying to figure out the best way to incorporate that PG component when it comes to having that requirement to the laboratories. CTS, as we said, just started theirs in 2022, and Forensics Assurance, I believe, was a couple months towards the end of 2021 where that was rolled out. I'm actually not certain what the date is. Again, they're trying to just feel out what would be involved in having that PG component, because you can imagine the difficulties in trying to ensure that something, all the labs are going to come up with the same results when taking it, knowing the MCMC process that's involved in a project. So I would imagine that it's ensuring that they're coming up with a test that's going to get the expected result each time.
And then the proficiency test providers also have to have their proficiency test approved so that they can be used. Is that?
I believe so, but I'm not certain about that. But I would imagine that in order for it to be sent out, it has to go through some sorts of audit themselves. And I believe most of these are ISO accredited to whichever standard is pertinent for the proficiency test provider.
And are you able to work with the proficiency test providers as they move forward in providing these types of tests with you?
Yes, we've reached out to several of them, actually asking if they could provide us with a test kit for us to look at. They're obviously interested in ensuring that the laboratories are getting what they need in terms of proficiency tests, because they're trying to sell proficiency tests. So they've been very willing to work with us as we look to different tests and furnish us with what we need.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay.
Any other comments? Go ahead, Fred.
Yes, Craig, Fred here.
Morning.
Good morning. Could you say a word about the inconclusive range? Because I noticed in the document that a handful of the labs that are using STR mix are using one set of ranges for the so-called inconclusive results, and other labs are using a different one. Were the labs in New York coordinating their efforts through common validations, or did each lab decide those ranges for inconclusive based on their own independent validations?
The latter. Each lab had worked on their own independent validations and determined those ranges based on the validation. So it's some of them aren't actually inconclusive ranges, but what we call uninformative ranges, which includes that LR of 1, which is inconclusive, based on the validations that we're seeing and the, for lack of a better term, positive, negatives. So that's where the lab that set up those ranges, but they were based on independent validation studies that each had done. I mean, we do talk back and forth every now and again to get some ideas, but it was based on the independent validations that were done. And as you can see, most of the laboratories have that range, 10 to the -3 to 10 to the 3 as their uninformative range.
And it looks like the New York labs are not using the so-called verbal predicates that SWGDAM has embraced, and which I, with great respect, disagree with. Not with you, but with the 5 or 6 verbal predicates that are often based on cut scores that have no particular statistical meaning.
Yes, again, that was a decision that each lab had done on their own. It just so happened that we all fell onto the side of not following the SWGDAM recommendations for those verbal scales. Again, speaking just from OCME, we decided that, based on what we're seeing in the validation and the false inclusions, false exclusions, or support for inclusion exclusion, again, for lack of a better term, we thought that it was best to have that uninformative range, and that, like you said, the different levels of verbal support, we just felt were a little too arbitrary. So we went with supports inclusion, supports exclusion, and then if it did come up with an LR of 0, would be an excluded, and then more questions could be asked during cross-examination or testimony as to the impact or the magnitude of that inclusion. But we thought leaving it as just those somewhat simple verbal predicates was the more conservative thing to do.
Does that mean that the likelihood ratio values themselves are not reported?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry?
Does that mean that the likelihood ratio numbers are not reported?
No, in our reports at OCME, and I believe all the other labs as well, the actual likelihood ratio value is reported.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Fred. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? So thank you again, Craig. That was comprehensive and reassuring. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I think we can move to a laboratory disclosure for the New York City OMCE Department of Forensic Biology, a proficiency test issue. We have a letter concerning a proficiency test failure notification and closure of the issue. Kyra McKay is available. This is an initial notification of an issue involving a proficiency test issue. The root cause was a mislabeling of 2 proficiency test exemplar samples, which led to a sample switch. The analyst was retrained and competency tested. Any discussion? Do we need to have Ms. McKay? Anybody?
But for no, Doctor, the late documents also contained a closure notification as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Shelley. Yes, thank you. Any comments?
I guess this is Catherine Gettings. I did have one question. So I'm looking at not the late documents, but page 302, the letter.
So could we bring in,
yeah, the letter from
Ms. McKay.
Just a.
She's on.
I'm here. Hi, everyone.
Okay. Hi. So I don't know if you're looking at, so I'm looking at this letter from February 22nd, 2022. The bottom of the first page talks about the issue. So it says the issue was localized to evidence examination stage of testing. The nuclear DNA technical leader reinstated this analyst to perform DNA testing in the laboratory in all areas other than evidence examination. And it seems to me that a mislabeling could occur at a lot of different steps, like a tube labeling issue could occur at a lot of different steps, not just at evidence examination. So I was just questioning that logic of having someone in a position to label tubes if it was a tube labeling issue, regardless of what step it occurred.
Sure, that is something that we considered, but the way that our laboratory works, at every other stage of testing, besides the this initial evidence examination stage, there are witnessing steps, sometimes multiple. So where the analyst will label the tubes and then have a witness those tubes, and not only the first set of tubes, but any transfer tubes are also witnessed. Sometimes the witnessing steps involve viewing the data sheet in the LIMS system as well and comparing the data sheet to the tubes. And so at every other step in the process, there are witnessing steps to catch such labeling errors. But at evidence exam, there is no such witnessing step. So that's why we were comfortable with this analyst proceeding through bench work as well as interpretation, because the issue had nothing to do with his interpreting of DNA profiles or writing reports. It was solely the evidence examination stage.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So there's no action required on our part. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Moving on then, do I have a motion? The next item on the agenda is an executive session. So I have a motion to go into executive session to discuss matters relating to a current investigation or matters that may lead to the appointment, promotion, demotion, discipline, or suspension of a particular person. Do I have a motion?
Fred Bieber, so moved.
Thank you, Dr. Bieber, and a second.
I second.
Thank you. And so when I call on your name, please vote. My vote is aye. Dr. Bieber.
Fred Bieber, aye.
Dr. Kidd.
Ken Kidd, aye.
Okay, Dr. Smith.
Jennifer Smith, aye.
Thank you. And Dr. Giddings.
Catherine Gettings, aye.
So at this point, if you're not, so the motion passes. At this point, if you're not a subcommittee member or staff, you'll be expelled from the virtual meeting and the streaming will be paused. The stream will resume when the executive session has ended. So thank you.
So we can take a 5-minute break. Elizabeth will stop the streaming and the recording, and then we'll come back and begin executive session. Thank you.
Thank
Do you want to give a specific time, Jill?
That would be 11:12 by my clock.
All right.
For my time. Sorry, Dr. Ware.
Thank you. That's all right. It's almost breakfast time.
Thank you.
Thing I'd like to bring up. I made some comments earlier in this meeting about the statistical calculations and reporting that the New York State Police was using. That was a nice example. I would propose that we form a small working group, 2 or 3 people of our members, to work in conjunction with BioTwig, just to examine the current procedures for calculating and reporting statistical strength of DNA evidence. And so I propose that as a motion to form a small working group of our subcommittee to work in conjunction with BioTwig to examine.
I second that.
Thank you. Thank you. Do I, any discussion? So we'll move to a vote. My vote is aye. Dr. Bieber.
Fred Bieber, aye.
Thank you, Dr. Kidd.
Ken Kidd, aye.
Thank you, Dr. Smith.
Jennifer Smith, aye.
Thank you, and Dr. Giddings.
Catherine Gettings, aye.
Thank you. Dr. Dooley, I don't think there's any other items on our agenda other than to announce the next meeting, which will be August the 5th of 2022. Date and the location to be determined. And I'll entertain a motion to approve the end of the meeting.
So moved, Catherine Gettings.
Thank you. And second? Second to end the motion?
I second.
Thank you. Thank you. And my vote is aye. Dr. Bieber?
Fred Bieber, aye.
Thank you. Dr. Kidd?
Ken Kidd, aye.
Thank you. Dr. Smith?
Jennifer Smith, aye.
Thank you. And Dr. Giddings?
Catherine Gettings, aye.
Thank you. So the meeting is adjourned, and we'll see you all in August. Have a nice summer.
Take care,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Have a nice summer. Bye.
Aye.
Bye, everybody.